Welcome to What's Going On, the weekly podcast and videocast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of What's Going On. I'm Pastor Katie here at First United Methodist, and I'm glad you could join me for this episode. First, we'll just do, again, a little bit of housekeeping. Don't forget that Friday and Saturday, we are having a rummage sale here at the church. You can drop your items off Friday starting in the morning. The rummage sale will start in the afternoon and then also be Saturday morning. If it is possible, if you could pre-price your items, that would be very helpful to those who are doing it. This is put on by our Bibles and Brews small group. If you're interested, Bibles and Brews meets every other Tuesday down at the bar called At the Bar. And they have different topics every time they meet, and it's a very informal group, a very fun group. I do not attend that one by design so that you can feel you don't have to worry about the pastor watching you, although hopefully you don't feel that way. But some people, it is a place that allows them maybe a little more freedom to go and talk about things that are hard, and I want that for you. It is led by Carla Hummel, who's on staff with us as our mission coordinator, and it's just been a fantastic group. And so I thank them they've been kind of pushing themselves out of their comfort zone and wanting to do some things together mission-wise. And so this rummage sale is a missions rummage sale with all the proceeds going to our Good Samaritan Fund. Our Good Samaritan Fund here at the church is an emergency needs fund that is monitored and administered by me as the pastor. This includes offering Hy-Vee gift cards to people who are in need. It includes if someone has an emergent need that can't be covered by places like the contact center, that we can help out with maybe a one-night stay in a hotel room or like gas to get somewhere, perhaps paying a utility bill here and there. So we now feel, especially with the news about Simples here in Yankton closing a majority of their operations, and having 250 people that will be out of jobs and figuring things out, that emergency funding might become a greater need for a while. And so again, we thank you, and we thank Bibles and Brews for doing this work, and also for the youth group who are supporting this as well. They're going to be, at least we know, Friday night having a bake sale along with the rummage sale. So it is definitely a good opportunity, a good thing to support, and we hope that you come support it by bringing items that you no longer need, and then also come finding some new items to you. So today I want to talk about something that came up in confirmation. So I teach confirmation on Wednesday nights. That's if you're looking for me during 605, you're going to find me with the confirmation kids, which are our 7th and 8th graders. So we have a 2-year confirmation program. And last night, our topic was on faith and trust, which I think is a really fascinating topic, and it was really eye-opening. And so I want to talk a little bit about kind of what I experienced, and then maybe explore and wonder with you a bit of why that might be. And so we started off trying to define what it means when we say faith, like that I have faith. What do we mean by that? So often in the church, I find that we use language that is hard to define. That is, if you're not a part of it, it feels very foreign and very hard to nail down. I'd say even if you are, it can be that way. When I was studying theology, there were so many words that it's really difficult to put a definition to it and I kept joking with the kids, you can't use the word that you're trying to define in the definition of that word. And so we talked about faith, and the kids kind of really nailed on pretty quickly this idea of faith is about trusting God, about that there's an element of belief to it, of what you believe, but then also an element of trust. So not only believing that God is good, but trusting that God is good, and that there is a nuanced difference between those things. And so then I had us I asked for a volunteer from the students and I had them come up front and I told them up front, like, I'm not going to try to embarrass you, at least not intentionally. And I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. I'm just going to ask you some questions. And so I was asking them about how their week was going, highlights of the week. The student that came up is working on a confirmation project. So I was asking about the project. And then I asked the student to stand up still with their eyes closed, and I was standing in front of them, and I said, okay, do you trust me? And the student was kind of, I don't know. And then I said, have you heard of a trust fall? I would like you to fall backwards. Now remember, I'm standing in front of the student. And so I'm asking the student to trust me. And I've said at the beginning, I'm not here to embarrass you. I'm not, going to do anything intentionally that's gonna go down that road. And so then I counted down and the student did not fall. And I said, okay, that's okay. Do you want to try it again? We'll count down again. 3, 2, 1. And the student's like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And I said, do you trust that I got you, that I've got you? I do. I mean, really, one more time, should we try it? Student still couldn't do it. What the student didn't know when they opened their eyes and turned around is that we actually had one of the confirmation mentors standing behind the student, ready to catch the student had they trusted me. Um, but it led to a really interesting conversation. One of the follow-up questions was for the students who did not volunteer, had you been that person, what would you have done? And most of the students said, even though I believe, Pastor Katie, that you are good and that you are not going to, I don't know that I can actually, that I would have fallen back either because you were in front of me. And one student said, I would have fallen forward because that's where you were. But it would have been not what I had asked, not what I instructed. And I found that really interesting. I've been with some of these students for 2 years in class, and including the student that had volunteered. They know me as their pastor, and I don't think that it was any sort of like that I've done anything in the past that would make them not want to trust me, but there was just this hesitation, just this kind of deep-seated creeping doubt of maybe other people's intentions, um, that whatever I had planned might not work out. And so it was fascinating that none of the students felt confident that they would have fallen back and that I really would have um, made a way for them to be safe. And that really got me thinking. One, because again, I think the belief was there. Honestly, like I said, I have no reason to think that they wouldn't believe that I would care for them. There's never been a pattern of behavior that would suggest otherwise. But I think that kind of illustrates the difference between belief and trust. And our students, I think, were highlighting something that this is what I want you to wonder with me today. Is there, in general, a lack of trust in people today? And the more that I sit with that, the more I think that might be the case. That we have things that we say we believe, that we assent to, that we're like, yeah, I'm with you. Yep, I believe that. Yep, go for it. But when it comes down to it, when it comes down to us making decisions based on that and putting our trust in something other than ourselves, I think, I think if I were to do that activity with the bulk of the church, I mean, like, granted, I have a lot of elderly people who probably shouldn't be doing an activity like that, but just given the parameters of what I'm trying to say, I think a lot of people would struggle with the trust, truly trusting another person. And I think truly trusting God to the point of truly acting on what they believe and what they say they believe. And I get it. I get it because I've lived it and I live it, but I think it is so much more pervasive than it's ever been. Every year that I've taught this confirmation curriculum, I've had the student fall. This was the first year that I didn't, and it was the first year that none of the students felt like they probably would have done it. Um, which was just, again, so fascinating. Um, but I think we have become to a place where we have um, lost our ability to trust other people. And I think that has also translated into our ability to trust in God. Because trusting in someone else, that person is a physical person. You can see them, you can hear them, you can feel them, but they're a person and they're flawed and they might not live up to what you're hoping. But it's really hard to trust in something you can't see and something you can't touch and you can't know for sure that it's going to be there. Um, and so I find that, and I see it in the culture as well in the last 5 years or more, this sort of distrust of any type of authority, distrust of, you know, people who are no longer trusting of their medical professionals, people who don't trust teachers, people who don't trust their, government elected officials, people who don't trust um, their elders. There's a lot of people who don't trust anybody who has a different viewpoint than them or a different background than them. There's a lot of fear and a lot of distrust. And so you kind of become really closed off and you lose your ability to be vulnerable and to connect with other people. But I think in doing so, we also are cutting ourselves off from our relationship and our ability to trust God. Um, because trust is a hard thing, and especially if you have to do it, um, trusting becomes easier when we have a pattern of behavior that we can look back on. The more consistent someone is in showing up, the easier it is to trust that they will, right? If you put someone in charge of something and they consistently show up and do the job and do it well, the more you trust them in that role, the more you might give them to do because you trust that they're going to do it because you have seen the pattern of behavior previously. It's a lot harder to trust when you don't have that, when you have to establish that, when it's a new thing. And again, I think as people, we are in a place right now where we generally do not offer trust very easily. We do not trust people we do not know. We do not trust things that we have not experienced. We are very cautious and hesitant and fearful. And I don't think that's the way that God has designed us to be. That's certainly not the way that God has designed the church to be. Um, but it is one of, I think, the challenges that we have to overcome of trusting in God and not primarily in ourselves. Um, so I told this story last night to the confirmation kids. You've heard me tell this story in a variety of iterations, but I'm gonna tell you again. Um, my experience of the difference between having faith in God and truly trusting God and trusting God with my life. I think you can probably guess how the story ends. Um, but I grew up in the church. There was never a time where I didn't, I wasn't a part of a church. I was baptized when I was a month old. I've always known of God. Um, when I was 15 years old, I went to a music festival in the summer and started to become aware of a different way to live out faith. The way that I had kind of grown up when I was in elementary school, what I witnessed, what I saw, where you go to church on Sunday and then you don't talk about it again outside of that ever. Nobody did. Just church was something you did. It didn't really have bearing on the rest of your life, at least not in any explicit way. I would argue that my parents are who they are because of their faith, but they weren't people that brought up faith in the home explicitly, but they lived it out. But I just never saw anybody who really talked about it, who really made connections explicit of I'm making this choice because of my faith or things that they chose to do or not do. I never saw any of that until I went to this music festival. And then all of a sudden I see people wearing t-shirts that have Bible verses on them, and I'm listening to music that is explicitly about Jesus, and that's not a hymn. That was a whole new world to me. Um, and so that began an exploration and a curiosity in me to um, know more about this, and there just was something about it that felt very intriguing to me, and something that maybe I would like to be a part of. And so that began a season in my life of learning more about God, of trying to make decisions that felt in line with what I was learning about, being active in youth groups and kind of participating in a counterculture of Christianity. Um, but it was still very much in here, right? It was a season of really like questioning and learning and being curious and seeking experiences and people out and just trying to understand what it's all about and what is my part in all of this. Um, and that really lasted a long time, and it drove me deeper into the church. I was working in a church. I was doing some ministry things in youth ministry. But I would say in all of that time, I was really developing my beliefs about God. I was developing a belief in God, learning maybe what it looks like to talk about it and to be open with it. But I had not yet learned to trust God. And I think that's maybe part of the process, right? Like, especially with God, because God, again, is not like a person sitting next to you. You have to learn about God, and you have to start to learn to know God before you can really take that next step of faith of trusting God. Um, I had started feeling nudgings of a call at a long time before I got to a point where I could let go of control of my life, because I believed in God, but I also believed very firmly that it was my job to be in charge of my life. That anything that I wanted, it was my job to make happen. Um, and I had a very strange belief. Again, I told this to the kids last night in confirmation. I had and I don't know where it came from. I just need to say that. Like, I had a very strange belief that I don't know where it came from, but I believe that if I were to truly, truly allow God to give myself to God, to fully surrender to God and God's will for my life, that God would send me as a missionary to Africa. I wonder if some of this was when I was a young girl. There was a girl that joined my class in elementary who her family were missionaries, actually with the Methodists in the Philippines. And she was lovely, but also a little bit odd. And I don't know if I got it in my head that that was probably the most faithful person that I had ever met. And that is like the highest level of faith, is to be a missionary somewhere across the world. And I probably should say I don't have anything against Africa. I do have a problem with some of the animals that are in Africa. And that in particular was my worry. I'd read a book that was set in Africa and featured a scene with a snake in a vehicle and someone getting bit. And I was like, I never want to go there. I don't think I can do that. And I just had a lot of fear about it. And so I held back. I couldn't trust God, because in my mind I thought, if I do this, if I step in faith, if I put my life in your hands, that's what you're going to make me do. And I don't want to do it. And I just couldn't trust that God would know me well enough to put me in a situation that made sense for me. And I also didn't trust that if I went down the road of being a pastor, you've heard me say this before, that I would ever have a family. Um, and that, and I just, again, like I would say, and I would believe that God is good. And Romans says that God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose. Like, I believed it, but I didn't trust it in my own life. Do you see that? It wasn't until God broke down like all of my defenses, like There was a summer that I was run ragged with going from camp to mission trips to camp. I mean, I spent probably less than a week in my apartment that summer, and I got to LTC, and it was about God's calling. And there was something like just physically drained in me that I just couldn't run anymore. But then there was just like all of these pieces that came into place, and finally, like God got me to a point where I admitted, like, I haven't been trusting you. Like I say these things, but I don't live them, right? And a big thing in my life, uh, I've been working on this in therapy, but probably a big word in my life is integrity. That um, if I say I will do something, I will do what I said I would do. Um, and I had been saying for a long time that I believe God, that I believe God is good, that I want to follow God. And then I wasn't trusting in any of that. I wasn't behaving in a way that aligned with that belief. We might call that hypocritical, which is one of the reasons many people leave the church is they look around and they see people who say one thing and then live a completely different way. They say they have this set of values, but really their values seem to be completely different based on their behaviors. And so that night, I um, finally submitted to God and said, okay, God, I don't know how this is going to work out. I am afraid that the things that I wanted aren't going to happen. But I'm going to trust that if this is you, this is what you want from me, God, that you are going to make it worthwhile and that the life that I will lead is the life that you designed for me. I, I still like really, I remember exactly where I was sitting. I remember how I was feeling. And there was a very real sense of fear and trepidation and grief over what I thought I was losing and really having no idea of what I was gaining in that moment. Um, but I think I think that's one of the things that the church as a whole, not just our church, but I think the church as a whole struggles with is truly trusting um, the people in the church. I think that maybe comes a little bit from kind of having withdrawn from each other and then not knowing how to really build those relationships again, getting to know each other, being vulnerable with each other. We see it happening in our various small groups, but if you're not a part of a small group, it's really hard to do that in 1 hour a week during corporate worship where you're talking to each other for a couple of minutes, right? I do try in the service to give people time to visit. And I'm doing that intentionally because I want you to know the names of the people who are sitting down the pew from you. I want you to get to a point where you might say, hey, let's go out for coffee, or, let's sit down after worship and fellowship and talk a little bit more. I'd like to get to know you. I'm trying because it is so important for us as a church to one, know each other and to trust each other to talk about when we're having a difficult time, to trust me as your pastor, to share your prayer concerns, to request a visit, to say, hey, this is what's going on with me. I could really use some help. Um, if there's something that I'm doing that is causing you to not feel like you can trust me or to you feel like you don't want to burden me or bother me, I I will say this every day if that's what it takes. You never bother me. If you have a need, if you need a prayer, if you are struggling, know that I'm here to listen. I'm here to pray. I'm here to talk about it. Um, I'm here, and I want to be here for you. That is part of what I am doing here in Yankton, and I would like to have that opportunity if you would allow me to, if you would allow yourself to trust me a little bit. Um, I think another piece, and I've had conversations around this as well, that sometimes we find it difficult to trust because of our expectations. That sometimes the way that we expect a person to act or what we expect someone to do, and then they don't show up in the way that we expect, that can make it hard for us to trust. And I think we need to be mindful of the expectations, spoken or unspoken, that we have of other people, including me as the pastor well, I just expected you to know that I was going to be in the hospital. Without telling me. I can't know those things. HIPAA doesn't allow anybody to tell me unless you give them express permission to. So that's an expectation or I expect the pastor to call me and just to check in with me, even though, I've given them no indication that I would want that or need that or receive that. So, sometimes there's unspoken expectations that get broken that can break trust. And again, we need to be mindful of our role in that, that if we have expectations, that we are speaking them, that we are talking about those, so that one, I know about them, two, if it's something I can do and am happy to do, or three, if it's an unrealistic expectation, so that we can talk about that, and so that we're not breaking trust, but that we're understanding each other as well. And again, I think that also goes for the people in the pews sitting next to you. Are there ways for us to be growing in our knowledge of each other, and then also hopefully growing in our trust in each other, because this church is God's gift to us, that we are the hands and feet of Jesus, and that our faith and trust in God is supported by our faith and trust in the people around us. And so, yeah, I found that to be a very interesting experience this week that led me down an interesting thought path and wonderings. And I would be curious to hear from you. What are things that you do to help develop and grow trust? Or if trust has been broken, how to rebuild that, how to reconcile, how to grow in it again. I think that's another piece of this as well. People who've have had trust broken in one way or the other in and through the church, and then how to heal from that, right? Our vision is to be a church of hope, healing, and belonging. I think trust is a very big part of that. And so it is my hope that you can experience that you have some trust and faith in our church because of your trust and faith in God. And if not, I would love to visit with you more about it. All right, until next time, God bless. Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Going On, a video and audio podcast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota. We'd love to have you join us for worship on Sundays at 10 a.m., either in person or via our live stream, which can be found at our website, www.firstumcyankton.org, or by searching First UMC Yankton on YouTube.